VR is very much this kind of giant testing bed, this giant playground, this huge like way of like prototyping stuff. I mean, I remember, I think it was like,
Welcome to Metaverse Degen. I'm Lion, and we're joined by someone mentioned in one of our previous episodes with Apple and Adidas. Who are you, and how did you get started, and what are you known for?
hi, I'm Silent, she, her pronouns. I work in immersive virtual event production as well as IRL event production, primarily as a VJ and motion graphics designer, but also sometimes as a event producer. Um, I also am a DJ, music producer, and two-time world champion professional drone racing pilot.
Oh, wow.
Um, and yeah, I like to do a lot of things. uh, um, yeah, and what was it? How did I get in VR? Was that the question?
Yeah. How did you get started all this? Because it sounds like you're up to quite a lot, and you have quite the uh, resume there.
Yeah, about 4 years ago, I was working for I was partnered in this video game production company. We were making a drone racing video game, and that kind of fell through. And me and my partner were trying to figure out what our next project would be. And we were discussing virtual reality. And this is around the time when the COVID stimulus came out. So I used my stimulus to buy an index. And I thought I got my index to play video games and research video games. I didn't realize at the time that I bought that like virtual VR headsets aren't a video game platform, they're a social platform. I realized that's like where its strength was. My um my studio partner got me into VRChat and showed me this world. And then he quickly got dumped by his VR girlfriend, and then he was like, "I'm going back to the real world." And I was like, "Well, no, I'm here." And so I started to see what was happening around here. And in terms of getting into the virtual event production stuff, I saw one of Fia Bunny's videos about no, it wasn't one of her videos. I was just following Fia and like all like I was very much like I fell in love with VR very quickly. I saw like how powerful it was, how it like creates connection. And I was just like lost in this new world. Everything was novel, everything was new. And you know, the power to explore from your own home was really awesome. And the time dilation effects of like just being exposed to all these new things, new worlds, new people constantly, just like stretched time like crazy, where each day felt like a week, and each week felt like a month, and each month felt like a year. And so I was just like I got lost in this very, very quickly. I felt like just like a 5 hour session, like you could just discover and do so much. And then Fia posted on Twitter that there was going to be this music VCat after party where there's going to be live DJs playing. I had just gotten back from MagFest, which is a music and gaming convention in DC. And I had been part of like the event production there, running sound for one of their stages, specifically their chiptune stage. And so I was like, holy crap, there's events, music events in VR. Like that's really wild. There's live DJs in VR. That's really freaking cool. And I knew I had to go. When I got there, um, I met this person, Miss Stabby. Miss Stabby is a DJ widely known in the scene. And they were spinning chiptune music, and it kind of blew my mind because I had just gotten back from MagFest doing this chiptune stuff, and here I was in VR doing like, and it just seemed like VRChat was this ongoing, like it was like MagFest, but ongoing. This music convention that was just like nonstop. This music and gaming convention that's never ending. That's kind of the feel that I got. And at that party were a bunch of like notable names of like a bunch of different doers in the scene that were all like part of all these different communities. And I just was like, whoa, there's a lot happening here. There's a lot of cool stuff happening here, and I fell in love very quickly. Uh, just like just with all of this. And then through meeting Miss Stabby, and like I knew I needed to get involved. I knew I needed to get involved with like this kind of event curation somehow, and I didn't know where that was going to be at all. Um, I saw this tweet about Ghost Club, a Japanese music club, and they had this MIDI light system where you could control lights in their club using MIDI. At least like that's how they did it. And I tweeted out, I was like, "This is so cool. I would love to do lights in a club in VR. Like that would be I feel like that would be the coolest thing." And then Miss Stabby hit me up and was like, "Hey, I'm doing the show and I need visuals. Like, would you like to make visuals for me for this like big event?" The event was called Virtual Base. And I was like, I've never done that before. I've never made visuals before. I don't know how I don't know what I would do. And Miss Tabby said, "Well, if you don't do it, I'm just gonna throw a bunch of GIFs on the screen." And I was like, "Well, if that's the bar, if you're setting the bar of like just throwing a bunch of GIFs on the screen, I feel like I could probably do a little bit better than that." I downloaded this free software called GL Mixer, or is that I think that's what it's called. It's very rudimentary, and I made visuals for Miss Stabby. We actually did a live recording. It was all pre-recorded. That's all I knew at the time. There was live DJs and stuff, but having a VJ like do live visuals wasn't really known, or like I haven't heard of it, and like no one was really exploring it. But we got on a Discord call. We did it all together at the same time. I recorded on my end. Miss Stabby recorded on their end. We lined it up. And then when I went to that party, the world was created by Pamath, the person that creates does a lot of the world building at the club I work at today, called Sanctum. And they had screens everywhere, and I watched my visuals be projected on these giant screens all over the place, and I was like, "Oh, this is what I'm doing. This is I'm hooked." I was like, I can not only be in these virtual worlds, but I can paint these virtual worlds with my own art, and that I just quickly fell into it. And now 4 years later, I'm still doing that today.
Oh wow.
Just leveled up, I think.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's a little long form, but that's how I got started.
Holy. Thank you for sharing all that. I have a whole bunch of questions. First of which, I have to ask, what do you mean by virtual production? And you did kind of allude to in the beginning that you do that in real life as well as VR. Would you mind explaining what that is a bit?
Yeah, sure. So I can start with the real world component. So just like event production, I primarily work in like DJ and music event production. So that means like working with a venue, talking with them to try to get all the tech together, renting out a venue, putting DJs on stages, and then either using LED screens or projectors, projecting visuals behind them, and just creating a music event. And I had been doing that in the past before VR. But in VR, it's the same thing, except much easier. Well, in ways, where you have a world, like you don't have to rent out a venue, you don't have to rent out equipment, everything just runs on everyone's computers. And so in VR, you have a DJ that's DJing, streaming their music into something like OBS, and then we're pulling up their streams in world on a video player. And then we're all like, we could all hear their music, and we're all dancing together in VR. Taking it one step further by adding like a VJ or like a visual jockey is a DJ streams their music to a VJ. A VJ couples that with their visuals, and then the VJ streams that via OBS onto a video player into a world, so that people going to events in virtual reality not only hear the music but see the visuals on the screen, just like the real world component.
Okay. So I remember having a conversation with Apple and Adidas about their hologram thing, and the first time I've heard about you being a VJ was in that conversation. And then all the clips I was sent, which if you're to go back, audience member, and watch the video, see a couple of silence uh, visual visuals that she created is be in there somewhere. Hopefully, Futureline can timestamp it somewhere for you. Fancy. But what what make what keeps you doing that thing, and what was your thoughts as well on what Adidas and snrlabs, Apple and Adidas is doing as well?
So a big component of why I still do what I'm doing in VR is the fact that, or like why it like I'm so infatuated with it, is we get to do really big budget things that would require a lot of money to do in the real world. Like you could have as many screens as you want. You could have all these like these just huge stages that would cost like multi-million dollars to produce in the real world. But because here it's all digital, you don't have to rent the equipment. We get to have free reign, and produce that kind of high level quality events with little to no money. You know, all you need is like the technical know-how on how to build worlds and you know, and a computer that can run it. But on top of that, in VR, we could start to do things that are more than what you could do in reality. And that's really like that has my heart a lot. That's the kind of stuff I chase here. Like with Adidas's Apple hologram screen, that's a sort of technology that we would never be able to create in reality. That's the hologram screen is a bunch of like you take it's really hard to describe, but using 3D visual software, we could inject 3D data into VRChat and create these giant like holograms that are floating in the sky. The way that their system works is like through a bunch of like series of floating like light orbs that kind of come together to create these like 3D images. It would the real world equivalent would probably be like one of those giant drone light shows where a bunch of drones are flying in the air creating big images. Except those are still limited to battery life and the speed and like how they interact with each other. Where here we are not limited by the confines of physics. So we get to do extraordinary things. One being, yeah, like the hologram cube is really freaking amazing. They also have another project called Moonpool, which is like a lower resolution version of that. One other thing I like to dabble in, something that we're working on at the club I work at called Sanctum, is we have a stereoscopic screen that lets us create 3D visuals where, like, in the real world, everyone would have to have 3D glasses in a club, which is doable and possible, but the way that we do it is a little extraordinary and kind of tailored to everyone's individual experiences. But we get to do things that, yeah, are outside by the confines of physics and outside the confines of finances. We get to really have extraordinary happenings here.
So, what is the typical VJ experience like, and what are some things that you can pull from that have a special meaning to you? And what is the typical VJ experience compared to like the hologram or the stereoscopic screen that you mentioned as well?
So a typical VJ experience of just producing visuals on a flat screen is very analogous to what happens in the real world. And so like two are very much in the same, where you're taking a bunch of video clips and mashing them together, or you're taking like a generative visual software and creating just flat visuals that you could, you know, potentially upload to YouTube or something like that, and just like watch on a flat screen. It's actually how I was able to get into IRLVJ, was like the skills that I learned here in virtual reality. I was able to take those and convert them into real life skills because one or they're very much the same. Where the hologram and stereoscopic experience is takes a lot more, I guess, technical know-how and ingenuity, where we are creating systems that don't really exist in the real world. And so, like Apple and DDoS, like their hologram cube has very particular ways to use it. So as they were inventing it, the VJs that control it were also figuring out how to control it and inventing ways to control it. We are kind of creating our own rules in that. The stereoscopic screen is very akin to like a 3D movie that you might see, and so I was able to learn how to do that through different means and stuff. There's lots of YouTube tutorials on how to make stereoscopic visuals, but then the way that we implemented at Sanctum was kind of interesting and new. It just takes a different kind of brain to wrap around it. I feel like my brain is growing in ways that other VJs in the real world don't really think about or ever have to think about. Yeah, I think that's if that answers your question.
No, yeah, it answers my question. I was just kind of curious with the reason why I asked you about like the hologram thing and like what was it like using it from your perspective? Is I was quite curious because I don't know how VJing works personally, and I got to see the after effects of what people like you do when working with it, but I've never like. I'm just kind of curious of what it's like from your perspective. So sorry if I put you in the spot with that question or
No,
not.
it's fine. It's never really anything I've really thought of like trying to package into an explanation, but I mean, yeah, it just utilizes using like interesting software. So most people use a software called Touch Designer. I use a software called Notch VFX, which is just like a real-time 3D generative software where like we're generating visuals in real time. Very akin to just like you have a mesh, like our avatars are made of meshes, and you're just importing that into a program, and then we have created systems in order to take that apart and reassemble it in virtual reality in a way. Kind of abstracted, but
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So how long would it normally take to make one of those visual experiences mask? Especially like one of the ones you made that caught my eye as well with that program is there are at least ones that I saw of your work is like the spinning hands. I believe if that was yours.
Yeah. So it takes a lot of prep work. So I know that project was months in the making. Of like Adidas and Apple had an idea, and they knew it could be implemented. They knew it could be done, and they kind of like were able to create systems in order to achieve that. And then they had to teach us those systems, and then we had to take this kind of new language and interpret that into the different programs we were using. And so that project took like a month of setup to create on my end of like tweaking and figuring it out and aligning things perfectly. It's like it uses like 6 depth cameras to capture a mesh from different angles, and everything had to be precise and done in a very particular way. But then once I had that system, it was fairly easy to start creating visuals for it, because then I pretty much have in my program, I have a box, and whatever I put in that box will be sent to VRChat as a 3D hologram. So then I just have a mesh of a hand, and so Lion Turtle is referring to these 3 hands that are spinning in space. And so I would just put these 3 hands and animate them in such a way. I think that probably took maybe no more than 5 or 6 minutes to set up that one visual. But setting up the whole project file probably took like a week to do. On top of like the month of trying to create like just the system to capture the data needed to send it into VR.
Okay. Wow. So how would preparing for something like the hands be different from what you would normally do on a flat screen or in the club you staff at?
Um, Equally, there's a lot of preparation that goes into creating a project file to do flat screen visuals.
Mm.
I use this program called Resolume to do just the 2D sort of stuff. Um, Sorry, let me gather my thoughts real quick.
Take all
Um,
the time you need. If I ever layer things too much or ask to too or something like that, let me know and I'll simplify it a bit.
oh yeah, no worries at all. And so I could set up a 2D like visual project file where something is just on a screen. I could do that probably in an afternoon, very, very
Mm.
quickly. Um, I have a project file that I've been building over the past 2 years. And so it's kind of like a digital art studio is like how I like to look at it, where I've been gathering tools and different video effects and all these different layers. I've created a giant palette of very much like an art studio in this digital box of Resolume. And so I could kind of carry that with me to virtual world to virtual world. At least that's how my brain makes sense of it. It feels like this digital workstation that I just carry with me. And so someone could call me up tonight and say, "Hey, I have a gig. Would you like to do it?" And I could just show up and without any preparation at this point and just execute doing visuals for just a normal 2D screen or an assortment of screens as well. It doesn't have to be just one screen. It could be many screens. In my project file, I've worked on it for many years now to be able to do that.
Mm.
Whereas doing something for the hologram cube or our what we call the reactor at Sanctum, that takes a lot more time to flesh out, and that like each one it's like building a whole new art studio, a whole new art like digital art studio, which and each of them has their own specific tailored needs. That's not something I could probably get like a prototype working in an afternoon, but to get to like a working project would take at least a month, I would say.
Oh wow. So you've alluded to something that also interests me that I'd like to ask you about. You said you were
Hmm.
capable of doing VJing in real life now based upon the skills you've gained here. May I ask what that experience is like and is what are the experiences compared to what you do in VR as well?
Yeah, I remember one of my first shows I did IRL at like a big venue, like VJing. I was explaining to the person next to me, one of the other technicians, what I do and like where I come from and that I come from VR, and they were like, "Oh, this must be a big step up for you," and I was like, "Actually, it's kind of a big like step down because it's so much easier." Like in VR, as a VJ. I am not only a VJ, I'm kind of the sound technician, and I'm also a little bit of an IT person, because I have to pull in my DJ stream and connect it with my visuals and combine it and make sure that the DJ sounds good and make sure that like their audio is coming in well. And then I have to worry about just like the internet crapping out or like all of the intricacies of streaming via OBS,
Mhm.
um, knowing how to set up all my streaming settings so that like everything will be clear and fine for everyone in the club. I can't have the bitrate too high. I can't have the resolution too high because then some people's internet can't handle that. And so I'm wearing a lot of hats. And then sometimes even I'll be sending my stream to a lighting person who does like real-time lighting in a club in virtual reality, and it's just like this huge pipeline and this kind of like sometimes a nightmare, but it can be scary at times to try to like create these systems. Like I'll be VJing, I'll be at a show, and then suddenly the audio will cut out, and like I have to then identify, is that an issue on my end? Is that an issue on like the DJ that's sending me stuff? Like then like for like a split second or like a minute or so, I have to now put on my IT hat and troubleshoot all these like kind of problems where In real life, I'd show up with my laptop that has up my visual program, and they just give me an HDMI cable, and I plug that into my computer, and that's all I have to do. And it's kind of a dream. It's kind of really lovely. And so people like, so whenever I do a show IRL, it's so much less stress, and it's so much easier. Even if like sometimes um, it, the stakes are a little bit higher because like I'm now doing things usually paid at this point, doing things IRL and making sure that like a crowd of however large from like 300 to a couple thousand or whatever have a good experience and that like nothing like happens in that way. But that's so much easier than juggling everything that I would have to do in VR.
Hmm. Okay. What was the experience like for you, from at least your perspective, being in the real life scenario when you're used to being in VR? Other than it being easy, I'm sure. Yeah.
Um, I mean, it was exhilarating. It is very, very cool to see my visuals on real LED lights and LED screens. There's some differences, like LED screens are very bright, and so you have to like know to like back off the brightness of your visuals. You don't want to blind your audience. So there's definitely like different intricacies. Then like I'm also like having to communicate with like the lighting person and the producers of that venue and that show, and like some that could be nerve-wracking as well in different ways.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, doing events IRL is a lot of fun. It's very cool. It's also very tiring. Doing all that kind of travel, figuring out where you're gonna be. Where in VR, I say the differences to that experience in VR is like I have my whole team in my ears. Like my team is in Discord. We're all communicating with each other. I don't have to run over and find someone.
Hmm.
I'm in the comfort of my own home. And at the end of a show, I could just take off my headset and collapse directly into my bed, which is really, really nice.
Hmm.
Um, but both are very, very similar, and both can be exhilarating in different ways. Um, I very much I would say love VR more because of the kind of extra things that we could do. And
Hmm.
in VR, it's always just like an art project between all of my friends. In real life, it's I'm much more of a technician. I am executing things that people are asking of me.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but both are so much fun.
Hmm.
I wouldn't trade either of them. I very much am happy living that kind of like that parallel reality of doing both and learning stuff from the IRL and bringing it into the VR, and learning stuff from the VR and bringing it into the IRL.
Hmm. So, based on everything you've told us so far, it sounds like VRChat has become a really good tool at adapting and developing your skill set. How much were you capable of using VR as a tool like that?
Hmm. Hmm. It's yeah. This VR is very much this kind of giant testing bed. This giant uh playground. This huge like way of like prototyping stuff. I mean, I remember. I think it was like maybe like 6 or 7 months into what I was doing in VR. Um, I got to work on a stage again created by Pamath. It was this event called there was the VRCDN showcase. It was VRCDN, which is this streaming this private streaming service that
Mm.
most DJs and events use in VR to stream our videos into here. Like, we used to use Twitch.
Mm.
Twitch has a bunch of fallback, has a bunch of caveats to it. VRCDN is really nice, and so at this event, Pamath recreated their own version of a stage from Ultra Music Festival,
Mm.
which is a giant music festival in reality. And this stage, I remember it was the first time that I used multiple screens instead of just one giant rectangle. The video screen was like shattered into many different screens all over. Something like 36 different like slices is what they're called. So like 36 different screens scattered everywhere. Um, and I remembered how special and amazing it was because I didn't feel like I had the skill set yet to work at a festival that large in the real world. And here I was having access to a setup like this, a setup that would have cost like multi-million dollars, this kind of like giant stage. Um, and it allowed me to explore how to go about that. Like how do I control that many screens? How do I take all my different video content and disperse it on all these screens? And so having done that experience, I felt very confident to be able to potentially do that in the real world. I was able to kind of gain that knowledge very, very quickly in a safe, um, financial risk-free environment where I don't have to please a client necessarily. I kind of get to do my own art. I get to work with my friends, but we're doing so at such a scale that it would be impossible to obtain like between my friends in the real world. I can't just get a bunch of my friends together to throw in like $5 or $6 or $7 million or whatever to build this stage. But here we are doing it. And then now, having done that, I know I could convert that skills into the real world. I know that when I have a stage with multiple screens in the real world, I could easily control that. And so I think more than anything, VR event production boosts my confidence in order to like pursue similar projects in the real world. And I know I could do them better than some IRL VJs that don't get to have that experience because they can only do from like small club to small club. People would wish to be able to do this, or maybe they can emulate it in their own rooms, in their own software. But here I am still having the stakes of like, oh, we're producing a show and many, many people are watching in VR. I mean, that information, that experience is so damn valuable. I'm so grateful to have friends that are creating these kinds of experiences for the rest of our friends and also for me, so I can train these kinds of skills.
So, what is it like working with a real life venue versus a VR venue? Like working with a team, getting into the position in which you're going to be helping at, and the overall experience. Are they identical, or are there differences between the two experiences? As a VJ, anyway.
They're fairly similar.
Mm-hmm.
In VR, it's all my friends, and so I kind of have this ease of being able to talk to anyone, and just kind of discuss these things, and knowing that like VR is janky, and so things go wrong, and kind of everyone understands this. Like there's internet failures and stuff like that, and so any mistakes that happen in VR don't feel heavy at all. They are kind of just like we all just roll with it. We're all doing this for passion and for fun for the most part. Where in reality, there's definitely some nerves in terms of like I'm answering someone else. They're not necessarily my friend. I'm not friends with the promoter. I'm not friends. And I learned this very quickly too when I tried to put my own artistic flair on things, and I had a event producer come up to me and say, "Hey, don't do that. Please do what we told you to do." And I'm like, "You're very right. You are paying me money, and you're my boss now." And so there's definitely a big difference in that. But in terms of like the actual like mechanics of the people interacting with each other, it's very similar. Like everyone has their own roles, everyone does their own thing, and everyone trusts each other in both VR and IRL. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say on that. Unless you would like me to elaborate on something.
You said something a little earlier that I've heard quite a few times from various people as well. You said something like your experience in VR, it seems, I'm going to paraphrase a whole lot, so please correct me if I'm wrong.
No worries.
Something along the lines of the experience you've gained from VR gives you a bit of an edge over a lot of the other people who do what you do in real life. May I ask, how
Hmm.
much of a different is that skill level between your VR background and them in the real life background? And what is the
Mm.
general reaction to that people finding out you do this in VR as well?
Um, yeah, that's a really good question. I would say like in terms of the differences between like the skill levels of people that do things in VR compared to people that do them in real life. Um, in VR, we get to condense the amounts of work experience that we get. So in real life, like some people will plan like for months to put on a singular event. And it takes a lot of effort and to like, like set things up, call venues and stuff like that. And so people in the real world are producing events at a very slow pace,
Mm.
where in VR, I could work 3 gigs in a single night, if I really want to, because I'm not restricted by traveling. I'm not restricted by like the kind of energy that I'm losing because I'm just kind of like within my own room in my own office. It reminded me of during COVID. Uh, there was all these real life DJs like that were sitting on their hands. All these DJs that weren't honing in on their skills because they weren't able to go out into the real world and DJ. They were very, we were all locked down. Whereas the DJs and event production people in VR, we never stopped. Well, we were really just starting, and we were putting events, like multiple events a night, kind of like deal across like our community. And so we were busting our asses. We were going hard at it and getting lots of experience in very little time. And so I've witnessed like to me the best DJs right now are in virtual reality
Mm.
because they could do multiple gigs in a week. They could set up their own gig, if they want to. They don't have to wait for a promoter to book them. Anyone could just spin up a VR chat world and start DJing and have friends and be getting real time feedback on what they're doing. And so, um, like similarly to like anyone working events in VR or like VJs and lighting people, it's like we get to just have access to venues. We get to have access to creating. We don't have to wait for someone to book us. We could just book ourselves.
Mm.
Um, as to the reactions I've gotten from people in the real world, um, it's hard to find people that will take what we do here as legit, which is kind of unfortunate. People really don't understand what it's like to be here. People
Mm.
think this is just like a video game or like this is just like, I don't know, it reminds me of back in like 2017, 2018, there was like these Minecraft raves and events that were happening where people would like build a Minecraft world and all like kind of get together in Minecraft, but then pull up a Twitch stream and then like listen to DJs like on Twitch, which is like a really awesome experience, but not quite as immersive and hands-on as what we're doing here in VR. And it seems like people do equate the two as being very similar and the same.
Mm.
Um, it unfortunately, one thing that does get the idea to like across to people is like talking about how some of the experiences that we're having here are now being showcased at prestigious events like the Venice Film Festival and Rain Dance Film Festival as well. And it wasn't until I speak about those accolades to people in the outside world when they start to take me seriously, which is kind of sad.
Mm.
But I very much understand that it's really hard to know what's going on here in virtual reality without like just putting a headset on someone. And it's you can't even just put a headset on someone. You have to put a headset on someone and then they have to dedicate like 100 hours or so to being in virtual reality to start to really appreciate that the differences between real life and VR are there's not that many differences. It's very, very much like very similar to the kind of like effort and skill that it takes to do things here.
Mm.
Um, is very much the same to the real world, if not more. Like things are more challenging, can be more challenging here. And that's some of the reactions I've gotten from people in the real world.
Okay.
I wish I could like kind of tell them that it's like, hey, I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of VJing through VR. But I think when I do live event production, um, my skills do shine through and show, and people are like, oh yeah, you are
Mm.
good. And usually I just don't bring it up. Or if I do talk about events in VR, I just talk about them as events, and I kind of leave out the VR component, and I just kind of let the person I'm talking to paint this picture in their head that that what we're doing is reality. I let them like kind of believe that, because there is no difference to me. It's very
Mm.
much the same.
Mm. Okay. Do you do you find it difficult to try and explain like where your skill comes from to people when they don't take you seriously? Because I know there's a couple people, like for example, whenever I talk about like for example, I've had this wonderful interview with this silent person to people in real life. Some people I know get it. It's like, oh yeah, cool, that's awesome. Other people, it's a little bit more difficult. I can only imagine with you in a more of a professional sense what that's like for you trying to explain, oh, there's this really large event with Sanctum, and there's multiple instances open with lots of people that also connected to this one time to, as sometimes I can only imagine it feels like the History Channel guy with the red lines going to different maps. Hello, just real quick, I'll only take a few seconds of your time. In the description that way you have a card, metaversedegen.card.co. We have many links down there for you to come check out. We have an X link, which is with me. We have a Discord where we hang out and do stuff all the time, as well as a Patreon link, where if you wish to support us, you can. Where there's also a show and another podcast separate from Metaverse Degen, that which we have available to our wonderful members who signed up, such as Niche, Training Fangs, Aliquum, and Forbidden Zero. Thank you all. You're all amazing. Enjoy the rest of your video. I won't take up any of your time.
Yeah, it could definitely feel like that at times. I feel like we are starting to get to the point where people understand that this is happening. Like the concept of virtual reality is starting to enter the cultural zeitgeist, and people are starting to understand that like this stuff does happen. More and more people are having experiences where they put on headsets. It just usually takes a lot of explanation. Like my favorite thing to do is to compare real life to virtual reality in like a bar setting, where it's like we're all standing in circle, we all have a drink, except the person to your right is in Japan, the person to your left is in Germany, the person to across from you is on the West Coast, and then I'm on the East Coast, and then people start to be like, oh, and just kind of like you really have to paint a picture to these people, and kind of like convince them that it's like it's really not that different, except one of my friends is a cat and someone else is a frog in a car, and it's just like and then people start to kind of understand. But I have a friend that they say that it's the aunt and uncle, oh, very cool syndrome, where it's like you're trying to tell someone a story and they're just like, oh, very cool, but it's just like it's going all over their head, like just way over their head. They just like
Yeah.
can't even conceive it.
Don't understand what they're talking about. Just nod and say yes and pretend like you understand. Frog in a
Yeah.
car. I definitely know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how what people think. I just was just had a wedding. My sibling got married in my like in the backyard at my house, and immediately after the wedding, I had an event in VR. And so like I like was like I have to go work, and then people were like, oh, okay, cool, like I'll see you later. And then my new brother-in-law like came downstairs to get a beer, like we're in my space, and I'm like rocking out on like my my MIDI controller doing visuals, and I can only imagine what was going through their head seeing like this person that they were just hanging out and talking to now like strapped in full body with a headset on, just kind of rocking out alone. It's a very it's hard to convey the experience to someone else. You do have to live here in order to like really um understand, I think sometimes, like why that is okay, why rocking out with a headset on in your own bedroom is how someone that doesn't do that can find that relatable, because it is
Mm.
relatable. They just don't know it yet.
Yes, I can very much understand understand that whole concept. I'm gonna ask you another question a little bit,
Hmm.
harking back to some other stuff. You mentioned that you worked with that you work with Sanctum. May I ask what
Hmm.
led to you working with them from when you first came into VRChat?
Um, so getting into VJing and VR, from what I understand in the Western world compared to like Japan, I was one of the first like VJs
Mm.
on the scene. There was very few of us, and I was able to quickly make a name for myself, and which I'm very fortunate for. Um, and there is this person, a music producer named Muzz, who is starting to build this project called Sanctum,
Mm.
based on a lot of like the lore that they were building in their music production, like kind of like and their DJing and like the kind of music they put out. They have this like story that they've been concocting in their head, and they wanted to bring that into reality through or into virtual reality. They wanted to like create this story and kind of like be able to invite people in. Um, and he had worked with various people in the scene, and was starting to put together a team, and just was asking the people that he knew, hey, like I need a visualist, so I need VJs, like who do you know? And I believe it was Melon Slices, who runs a club in VRChat called Dieselworks, who recommended to Muzz that he hire both me and my friend Juno, as like the visual team. And so it started from there. He had a really unique idea of having this thing called the reactor. At the time, it was reactor version 1, which was a large cylindrical screen.
Mm.
And I was happy to take on the challenge of the unique properties of putting visuals on such a screen. And me and Juno worked together to create a new visual language to work with that. And I think that was like now 3 years ago. And Sanctum has grown into a much, much bigger project with much more stages, a lot more staff. People can, have come and gone from our staff, and yeah, we stuck to it. It's a place where I get to grow and stretch my VJing skills, and the team listens to my wild and crazy ideas and executes them, which is really, really awesome. And we all together have been creating this really amazing project that we are growing to love more and more as we work on it.
Wow. Well, so when you first came in here, did you ever expect yourself to be in the kind of position you're in now when you first put on the headset before your friend left you?
Not at all. I had no idea. And like I said, I thought I was coming in here to research VR to figure out what the next like project would be for the video game company that I was working on with a friend of mine. Um, I had no idea it was going to lead me into learning how to do animation and visual effects. I That really caught me off guard. Like I like had always been interested in I've always been interested in event production or teams
Mm.
producing things larger than themselves. It is for me. It started back with like marching band in high school. I liked being in a part of like a small part of something that created a bigger happening. Um, and then after that, I was in a ska band. That was a lot of fun. And then I toured around with another musical project. Music was always in my life. I knew that I would be working with music. I went to college for audio engineering because I wanted to work in a recording studio, and I wanted to help other musicians and bands see their projects to fruition. So that's always been in me. That's like that. Like I was working on this video game design team, this video game company, because I wanted to make projects and make things bigger than bigger happen. That's bigger than me.
Mm.
I got into drone racing, and specifically team-based drone racing because I liked being like part of a team. So that was always in my DNA. Um, I was always intrigued by VFX animation. I had no idea how I would ever get into doing something like that. And it wasn't until like maybe a year ago when I started to dabble in animation myself. It snuck up on me. Like everything that I've done in VR in terms of like event production, snuck like it surprised me. I felt like VJing reached out to me and grabbed me instead of me reaching out to VJing and grabbing it, which is kind of really weird. But I kind of just chasing the thrill of being part of something bigger than me, like is like how I found myself where I am. I learned to say yes more than say no. I realized that when someone says, "Hey, would you do this for me?" that saying yes opens like 10 doors, and then I could look at through these 10 doors that have opened in front of me, and I could peek through each one and see which one I want to go through and see like what happens as I venture through them. And since I've opened, I don't know, thousands of doors, and I keep being led to more and more amazing, exhilarating experiences. So yeah, no, I did not I did not expect to be doing what I'm doing today. I just started doing it, and then I realized that I was good at it, and I enjoyed doing it, and I just been chasing the serotonin ever since.
Mm. You know, that's a very similar story I've heard a lot of the time where someone will come into VR chat and one of the friends like, hey, there's this really cool thing you gotta go see. And then they'll go do it and says, now you should do this really cool thing. Here, download these programs.
Yes.
I don't have the tech to do it. Oh, I have a spare one. You take it. Now do it. I'll see you in a week. And the next thing you know, they're off on some random VR chat
Yeah.
adventure.
Yeah. So many of my friends that I see doing things today are like people that I never would have expected to be in the positions that they are in.
Mm.
Um, Um, my brain is making this funny kind of reference where it's like I have friends that were just like full body thotties and they were just kind of going around like just like existing in VR, and then like I don't talk to them for a couple months, and then suddenly they're running some of the biggest events in this place. I'm just like, what happened? Like, and a lot of it is VRChat is like the people here are really good at peer pressuring their friends to do creative things. Um, One thing I hear a lot is like, it's not that hard. It's not that hard to get into. Start somewhere. A lot of people joke about the DJing pipeline. It's like if you hang out in VRChat, if you hang out in the VRChat rave scene long enough, you are going to be DJing yourself. And I see it happen time and time again.
Yep.
And uh, and also, I mean, for me, with VJing, there was very few VJs in the scene, and I got to this point where there were so many people requesting that I work with them. They were like, "Hey, can you VJ for this gig? Can you VJ?" And it got to this point where, um, like I couldn't say yes anymore. I don't like saying no. I've learned to practice saying no. It took a long time to learn that, but I just got to this point where anyone that showed any minute interest into maybe getting into visuals, I just thrusted software on them. I was like, yes, please, here you go, learn this, do this, so that whenever anyone asks me to VJ, I could say I can't, but here's this person. I know there's a lot of other people that have the same experience, and the big thing is like there's not that much financial risk in running
Yeah.
events in VR. There's very little. There's so many open, free venues to use in this place. And so when someone's like, "Oh, I would love to run this gig," like I would love to do a gig, I'm like, "You could do that tonight." Like it's like if you want, like you like go onto Twitter. There's thousands of DJs that want to play gigs. Say, "Hey, I'm doing a pop-up. Who wants to DJ?" You'll have like 30 people answer you, and in less than 15 minutes, someone can set up a show here. And it's a lot of fun to watch your friends have a lot of fun. And once people get bit by that bug, they want to create bigger and better experiences for each other. People are always hanging out in Discords, creating, and there's so many people in the space that are willing to answer questions for people because, like, we understand how hard some of these things are, and that there's not that many great resources to look for on the internet, and people have realized that the problems that they have solved for themselves, they can hand those solutions to other people
Mm-hmm.
without having them jump through the hoops of like figuring it out on their own. Um, Lots of people here are very, very willing to share like the kinds of skills that they have learned because they understand that how fulfilling being a doer in the space is. It's very, very fulfilling. It's very nice to watch your friends dance, laugh, and have fun. And that's a very addicting. It's just very, very addicting to watch your friends smile and laugh. And I think that's what we all do this for.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's a very VRChat thing to do, to want to share what you enjoy with everyone around you, even if you gotta grab them by the feet, kicking and screaming. We're going on an adventure into the VRChat club scene, boyo, whether you want to or not, and just want to encourage people to do whatever it is you do, whether it's world building, visual effects, running events, music. And I've heard so many stories from people around me of doing similar things happening. A friend of mine had a similar thing happen to him where he got into dancing here in VR, got full body, went into a black hat, and the next like, oh, guess what? I know a thing. Come with me. And the next thing you know, a month later, he's an e-boy. You know who you are. The typical mirror
Yeah,
dwelling dancing e-boy.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's we live in a very interesting place that like I don't know. I don't know many other cultures like this. Maybe there's been some punk communities that I've lived in the past that are very similar, where it's like, hey, I have a space. I have like a large area. We could put bands on here, and we could just make everyone happy. And I mean, I think that's what we're all here to do. In a very like just metaphysical idea. It's just like we're all here to make each other happy and make each other's lives better. I hope at least.
Mm. I think to some degree that's what everyone is shooting for. At least in the time I've been poking my neck around in places, it seems to be, at least a lot of the veteran players seem to be that way, where I think to some degree is like what you would consider late game content for VR chat is watching someone else's first time experience into something better than where you started, where it's like instead of being in a black hat listening to a bunch of kids screaming funny 5-letter gamer words, instead they get to bring him to some really awesome audio reactive venue playing music for their first time. I think that is like a veterans player enjoyable experience nowadays, which then adds to their positive experience and then just goes down the line from there.
Yeah, and there's a big thing of like people like just like looking at something that someone else is doing and saying, "Wow, that's so cool. I want to do that." And all of us that have like started from nothing, started from like very basics, saying to them, "You can too." Like
Mm.
we've all started from like we were all bad DJs at one point. We were all bad VJs at one point. We all started from like a lot of people here have started from nothing. Of course, there are some people that have like taken their IRL skills, like some people that have gone into like video game design and they come into VR chat to kind of like express that. But even then, everyone has started from nothing. Like no one
Mm.
is just good at anything, especially in VR. It's this is nothing about this is intuitive. This isn't like throwing a ball, like doing physical activities. There's some people that do have like natural born talent in some ways, but here it's like we all have to learn from the very basics in the beginnings, and everyone, all the creatives here understand that like they, no one was born with the being able to just use Blender. No one was born just like was like, oh, I was a natural born weight painter. No, that doesn't exist. Like it's it takes practice and skill and just doing it over and over again. And yeah, I don't know anyone that is like has like a large ego in this space where we all know that like you have to start from nowhere. You have to start from nothing.
Mm.
And we all know the good software and tools and tutorials and like I if anyone wants to get into VJing, I like have a bunch of videos on YouTube that I could be like, hey, here's how to start. Have fun. Now go explore and figure out your own way to do it. But
Mm.
yeah. Um that's probably one of the biggest. That's probably the biggest reason why I'm still here in VR and do the things that I do here. Watching everyone else learn that they too can be creative, they too can learn a new skill, and they too can find ways to have fulfilling lives here in this space.
Mm. So I have a couple of. Oh, well, I have a fun question for you. What's next for you since you're doing all this stuff here? Like, what are some of the things you wish to accomplish next if you or have your eyes on the horizon at all? I'm just kind of curious. Based on all the accolades, like some of the things you've mentioned, I've heard of before, and it sounds like you've been up to so many things. Like, where are you looking for your next project or something you're looking forward to?
I'm things that are next for me is like I'm really excited to continue exploring some of the new tools
Mm.
and fun systems that my friends have created for me, like stuff like the hologram cube and like a decent Apple's Moon Pool is another one that they have. I've only done a couple events with them, and I'm just scratching the surface of what their technology is capable of.
Mm.
And so I'm excited to explore those avenues. But similarly with Sanctum, it's like we have this new system for the Reactor 3.0, and I'm just scratching the surface of what I could do with that, and I'm excited to grow and learn um, what I will be doing with that system in the future. Um, I'm excited for other projects that people are creating, and I know someone's cooking up something somewhere that I'll probably be able to get my hands on and be able to learn and grow my own skills.
Mm.
Personally, I want to start making more interactive, immersive experiences for people, both in VR and in reality. I'm very excited about pursuing those things. I want like I love when I could create some kind of immersive experience and hand the like controls to the audience and let them be able to like create things with systems that I create.
Mm.
Um, I am starting to break out more into the real world and do visuals IRL. I'm creating my own VJing company
Oh.
to kind of pursue that and really be able to blossom into a career with that into the real world and try to find like financial stability in my own life through the skills that I've learned here. Um, oh, what else? I had something else in mind. I want to learn world creation myself. I want to kind of pursue creating my own events. I've been kind of being a hand on other people's projects. I would love to try to make things for myself
Mm.
and try to do my own kind of forms of storytelling. Um, but I'm just going to keep on keeping on and growing my skills and pursuing projects that are presented in front of me. Um, yeah, I'm just not going to stop. I don't see myself stopping anytime soon. I'm like 4 years into this, and I'm excited for the next 4 years and beyond. I
Cool.
know. So I mean, the one thing that I'm really excited for is the stuff that I don't know what's going to happen next. Like I every few months, someone surprises me with something else that's very freaking amazing and incredible. And so, um, my next project is one that doesn't exist yet. I'm excited to see what that project is.
Mm. So I have two last questions for you before we wrap up. First is, where
Hmm.
did you get your name? Silent.
Um, Silent comes from back in 2010, I started producing music and I was trying to come up with some kind of like I was writing a story in my head and I was kind of trying to come up with this alter ego for myself, which I named like Silent Antagonist, which
Mm.
comes from like the video game trope of having a silent antagonist. This like character in a video game that kind of mixes things up but never really speaks a word. Someone that's kind of like in the background pulling all these different strings or whatever. And in turn, I've adopted that name fully. Uh, well, that name went from music production to drone racing, and then I just brought the name Silent to virtual reality. And then it very quickly became the name that I carry day to day. And I kind of like being this kind of silent antagonist to myself. Or like I like to be this person behind the scenes that creates experiences, that pushes buttons, that kind of makes people think and do things differently, mainly in ways of like inspiring people. Like I love uh, um, one of my favorite things in the world is when someone sees my art and it inspires them to become creative themselves. I've had a lot of people in my life say that they never did anything creative and then they saw what I was doing and that kind of sparked in them to be creative themselves. So I like being the silent antagonist in ways.
That's a very, very interesting origin of your name. Thank you for sharing that. And last question is sort of on topic where the story where that little bit ended. If someone wishes to do what you do, what kind of advice would you give them?
Mm. Um, I your first project will always be crappy, I guess. I mean, not even. Um, Everyone starts from somewhere, and art is amazing, no matter what form it takes. If even if you're like not super proud of it, it's still amazing and incredible. And I would definitely encourage people to keep on pursuing something if they are at all interested in it. I kind of want to. I still have the recording of the first visuals I ever did, and I look back at them and I'm like, wow, that sucked. But it's also there's a lot of beauty in it at the same time, and I see a lot of like the kind of original ideas that I've had then still exist today. But every day you always get better. Every day you always get better. Uh, YouTube is your friend. YouTube tutorials are definitely your friend. Everything I've learned from YouTube, I would say. And experiment. Find your own ways of doing things. There's no correct way to make art. All art is valid. I would say that. Um, and have fun doing it. Don't stress yourself out. Take breaks. Take frequent breaks. Learn to say no. That's something that I didn't learn early enough. Don't say yes to every single project. You will burn yourself out very quickly. But most importantly, have fun. And if you're not having fun anymore, discover ways to have fun with it again. Take a big step back, and don't overexpend yourself.
Thank you very much again. I appreciated hearing all about your accolades from your real life clubbing to what you do at Sanctum to some of the details of VJing. Thank you. It was amazing to hear all about it. Where can the audience find you
Um,
if they wish to find you as well? Sorry.
yeah, no, that's fine. Oh yeah, let me. So I am. Let me pull up my Twitter and Instagram because I forget my Twitter and Instagram names all the time. So I'm at underscore silent in VRChat. On Twitter, you can find me as underscore silent with two S's, so underscore SSILENT. And where the frick is my Instagram? And you can find the art and a lot of the adventures that I have. I post onto Instagram, and my Instagram is underscore silent underscore VJ. And that's where you can find me. Yeah.
Okay.
And also come to Sanctum. Sanctum's a lot of fun. I'm really proud of what we're doing there. And that's like kind of where I get to make my favorite kind of art. So please come to Sanctum.
Well, check out the Hoobly What's It right down that way. The description thingamabob. Everything that Silent here mentioned will be right down there for you to go check out, as well as some other fun links. So go and adventure down that way. So I feel like doing the thing, the thing that Raptor does at the end of each of these. Instead of doing the typical outro, I want to pose a question to you, the audience. When was the last time you were inspired to do something? Tell us all about it right down in the comment section. I'd love to read everything that you were inspired to do. See you in the metaverse, folks.